He slammed his resignation letter on the admiral's desk, looked the man dead in the eye and said, "My daughter needs a father more than this Navy needs a ghost." Just like that, 12 years of service, 2 deployments, 1 classified mission that still woke him up at 3 a.m. gone. Traded for a second-grade lunchbox and a mortgage he could barely afford. Nobody saw what came next coming. Nobody. Drop a comment with your city right now. I want to see how far this story travels. And if this hits different, subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens in part 2. The resignation letter was still warm from the printer when Commander Joel Ghost Hartley set it face down on the kitchen counter and poured himself a cup of coffee he didn't intend to drink. It was 5:47 in the morning. He knew because he had been awake since 3:12. He knew because he was always awake at 3:12. 12 years of the United States Navy had burned that hour into his nervous system like a brand, that thin, restless window between the last watch and first light, when a man was too tired to be useful and too wired to surrender to sleep. In the Navy, that window meant something. Out here in a 2-bedroom rental in Annapolis, Maryland, it just meant staring at a ceiling and listening to the quiet. Real quiet. Not the engineered silence of a submarine running dark. The ordinary, devastating quiet of a house where the only other living soul was a 7-year-old girl asleep down the hall with a stuffed rabbit named Captain. Joel lifted his coffee mug, looked at it, and put it down. He walked to Lily's door and cracked it open the way he did every morning, the same instinct that had once made him check a hatch before clearing a compartment. She was on her side, one arm thrown over Captain, her dark hair fanned out across the pillow. 7 years old, and she already slept like she was solving a problem. Serious. Focused. Even unconscious. She got that from him. He wasn't sure if that was a gift or an apology. He pulled the door back almost to closed and stood in the hallway for a moment, one hand on the doorframe, and let himself feel something. He had no military language for the specific aching weight of being entirely responsible for another human life with no commanding officer above him, no chain of command, no mission brief. Just a little girl and the world, and every mistake he might make between now and the day she stopped needing him. His phone buzzed on the counter. He already knew who it was. Reuben Sloan had been Joel's best friend since they were both 22 and miserable at officer candidate school in Newport, Rhode Island. Reuben had gotten out of the Navy at the 8-year mark, met a woman, opened a logistics company in D.C., built something real. He called it going civilian with intention. Joel had called it quitting. That had been a point of tension for about 2 years. Then Lily arrived, and everything Joel was certain about started loosening at the joints, and by the time he finally filed his own separation papers, he wasn't too proud to admit that Reuben had seen the exit before he did. The text read, "Dude, I sent you something. Don't throw it away before you read it. I'm serious." Joel picked up the envelope on the counter beside his coffee mug. He hadn't noticed it the night before, slipped under the door. Reuben had a key for Lily-related emergencies, and apparently considered this an emergency. The envelope was ivory, heavy stock, the kind of paper that cost more than Joel's electric bill. In the top left corner, embossed in gold, the Meridian Group, private social invitation. He opened it the way he opened everything, clean, efficient, no tearing, and read. It was an invitation to something called an elite social mixer, hosted at the Hargrove Estate in McLean, Virginia. A curated evening for accomplished individuals. Black tie, open bar. A guest list described without irony as Baltimore and D.C.'s most extraordinary minds. At the bottom, in small italic print, attendance is by referral only. Your name was submitted by a valued member. Joel read the thing twice. Then he texted Reuben Nome. His phone rang 30 seconds later. "Just hear me out," Reuben said without preamble. "I just read it. And whoa, no. Joel. Reuben, I have a 7-year-old. I have a parent-teacher conference on Thursday. I have a refrigerator that's making a sound that I'm 80% sure means I'm about to spend $800 I don't have on a new compressor. I don't have time for a..." He glanced at the invitation, curated evening for extraordinary minds. "You've been out of the Navy for 14 months. I'm aware. You've been on exactly 1 date. That's not..." You took her to a hardware store, Joel. Silence. We were in the neighborhood, Joel said. She texted me, Reuben said. She texted me and said, and I'm quoting directly, "Your friend took me to look at PVC piping on a Saturday night, and I think he was genuinely excited about it." Joel opened his mouth, closed it. He had been excited about the PVC piping. He was replacing the drainage under the kitchen sink, and the measurements were more complicated than anticipated, and he'd needed a second opinion, and Deborah, the date, had seemed like a practical woman based on her profile. So, the point, Reuben continued, is that you're not reintegrating. You're surviving, and those are two different things. I'm fine. Your idea of socializing is taking Lily to the Home Depot. She likes the garden section. Joel, what do you want me to say, Reuben? That I walk into a room full of people and I don't know how to... He stopped, pressed his palm flat on the counter, breathed through it. I spent 12 years knowing exactly where I stood in a chain of command. I knew my job. I knew my team. I knew what the mission was. I walk into a cocktail party now and I don't know what any of it means, what the rules are, who I'm supposed to be. You're supposed to be a guy at a party, Reuben said, not unkindly. That's all. Easy for you to say. I'm coming to pick up Lily on Saturday at noon. Mrs. Patterson already said she's happy to have her for the weekend. The mixer's at 7. I've already RSVP'd for you. Joel went very still. Reuben. Too late. You RSVP'd for me without asking me. Correct, because if I'd asked you, you'd have said no. I did say no. You said no after, Reuben pointed out, which is different, legally speaking. Joel looked at the invitation again. The gold embossing caught the kitchen light. He thought about Lily asleep down the hall with her serious face and her stuffed rabbit. He thought about 12 years of knowing exactly who he was and what he was for. He thought about 14 months of figuring out neither. He thought about the PVC piping. Deborah's face. How she'd been polite about it, which was somehow worse than if she'd just left. 1 hour, he said. I'll go. I'll stay 1 hour and then I'm leaving. 2 hours. 1. Deal, Reuben said too quickly. See you Saturday. He hung up before Joel could renegotiate. Saturday arrived the way Saturdays always did when Joel didn't want them to fast, and then all at once. Lily woke him up at 6:15 by sitting on his chest and explaining at length that Captain the Rabbit had lost one of his button eyes, and this was a crisis that required immediate adult intervention. Joel found the button, sewed it back on with the small sewing kit he kept in the bathroom cabinet, a holdover from Navy habit, where self-sufficiency was non-negotiable, and had Lily's breakfast on the table by 7. She ate her scrambled eggs with the focused intensity she brought to everything, elbows on the table, feet swinging above the floor, narrating a complicated story about what had happened at recess on Friday that involved a disputed ball, someone named Gracie, and what Lily described as a serious misunderstanding about the rules. Joel listened. He asked questions at the right moments. He learned that the situation had been resolved through negotiation Lily's term, and that she had brokered a compromise that satisfied everyone involved. He felt something he couldn't name watching her talk. Pride, obviously. But something else. Something that felt like recognition. She was going to be fine. Whatever he was doing, however uncertain and improvised, it felt she was going to be fine. Reuben arrived at noon with 2 cans of soda and a bag of chips, which Lily greeted with the kind of enthusiasm she reserved for very few humans. She called him Uncle Reuben, which Reuben accepted with the gravity it deserved. Joel pulled Reuben aside by the front door, while Lily gathered her overnight bag. I want to be home by 10, Joel said. Sure. I mean it. Of course. And if anything happens, anything, you call me, and I'm on my way. Joel. Reuben put a hand on his shoulder. She's going to watch 3 movies, eat too much popcorn, and sleep until 9. She'll be fine. Mrs. Patterson has raised 4 kids and 12 grandkids. You know this. I know. Then let yourself have one night. Lily appeared in the hallway with her backpack, captain tucked under one arm, and her serious expression fully deployed. She looked at Joel. He crouched down. "You good?" he asked. "I'm good," she said. Then after a pause, "Are you going somewhere tonight?" "Uncle Reuben talked me into a party." Her eyes went wide. "A party? You hate parties." "I don't hate parties." "You say they're loud and structureless." Reuben made a sound that was definitely a laugh disguised as a cough. "Go have fun," Joel told her. He hugged her, held on a second longer than necessary, and then let go. She kissed his cheek with the casual efficiency of someone with important places to be, and then she and Reuben were out the door and down the steps, and Joel was standing alone in his front hallway, holding a door open on an empty house. He stood there for a moment. Then he closed the door, went to the closet, and found the suit. He'd worn it once, his brother's wedding 4 years ago. It still fit. Navy had made sure of that, and discipline had kept it true. But it felt foreign in a way that nothing in his uniform closet ever had. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror and spent longer than he would admit adjusting the collar, the tie, the exact angle of the jacket. Not vanity. Something more like calibration. In the Navy, you wore the uniform, and the uniform told the world what you were. A suit didn't do that. A suit just said, "I'm trying." He drove himself to McLean because he had no intention of being stranded. The Hargrove estate turned out to be the kind of address that made GPS sound slightly odd. A long private drive, iron gates that stood open and somehow still felt like a boundary. A house that described itself through sheer mass. Not beautiful exactly. Authoritative. There were valets. Of course there were valets. Joel parked his own car on the street. He walked up the drive, identified the entrance, and did what he always did. Before entering an unfamiliar space, stopped at the threshold, spent 3 seconds reading the room, and then went in. The main room was exactly what he'd expected, and nothing he was prepared for. High ceilings. Low lighting calibrated for warmth rather than visibility. A string quartet in the corner playing something Joel recognized but couldn't name. Clusters of people in expensive clothes performing the specific choreography of high-end social interaction. The lean forward that signals interest, the angle of the wine glass, the laugh that arrives 2 beats before it's earned. He understood the mechanics of it. He'd studied human behavior under pressure for 12 years. He could read a room. He just didn't belong in this one, and every person in it would figure that out in about 45 seconds. He moved to the bar. Ordered club soda, not because he didn't drink, but because he had learned a long time ago that clarity was a tactical asset in unfamiliar terrain. He positioned himself at a slight angle from the main cluster where he had a clear sight line to both the entrance and the primary gathering area, and he assessed. Men in their 50s and 60s mostly. The kind of wealth that didn't announce itself with logos that had moved past logos. Women in structured dresses who moved with the confidence of people who had been in rooms like this so many times that the room had lost the power to intimidate them. And then one woman who was different. He noticed her not because she was the most striking person in the room, though she was, but because of how she moved, controlled, economical, no wasted motion. She crossed the room toward a small group near the windows, and the group reorganized itself almost imperceptibly to accommodate her. Everyone shifted just slightly, turned just slightly the way a formation adjusts when someone with authority enters it. She was not performing ease. She was simply at ease. There was a difference Joel recognized from the only other context he'd known. The very best officers he'd served under didn't perform command. They just commanded. She was speaking to a man in his 60s, something that made him laugh, a real laugh. Not the 2 beats early kind. And then she said something else that stopped the laugh cold and made him nod very slowly in the specific way that people nod when they've just been told a truth they didn't want to hear. Joel watched her for exactly long enough to form an opinion and then looked away. He took a sip of his club soda. "You don't want to be here." He turned. A man to his left, maybe 60, silver hair, the relaxed posture of someone who owned at least 3 properties. He was smiling, not unkindly. "Is it that obvious?" Joel said. "Only to someone who also doesn't want to be here." The man extended a hand. "Warren Fall. Real estate development. Joel Hartley. He shook it. Former Navy. Former, Warren said, as if the word itself was interesting. What do you do now? I'm figuring that out. Warren laughed the real kind. Honest answer. Most people say something about consulting. I'm not consulting. Good. Consulting is a word people use when they're between things and too proud to say so. He tilted his drink toward the room. You know who organized this? I don't. Meridian Group, curated matchmaking, social and professional. The woman who runs it. Warren paused, seemed to select his words, is either a genius or a sociopath. Possibly both. She has an almost disturbing ability to put exactly the right people in a room together. Joel looked at him. Matchmaking. Don't panic. It's not speed dating. Think of it as engineered serendipity. Warren smiled. Though I notice she's working the room tonight herself, which she doesn't usually do. Something's different. Who is she? Warren nodded toward the windows. Joel already knew the answer before he looked. The woman who moved like an officer. Victoria Ashford, Warren said. You've heard of Ashford Capital. He hadn't. About $4 billion in assets under management. Built from scratch, took over her father's failing firm at 28, turned it into something no one saw coming. She's been on Forbes 3 times. She's also... Warren paused again. Not easy. Not easy how? Not easy in the way that people who are very good at one thing become not easy about everything else. She's precise, demanding. She can read a financial statement in 6 minutes and find the one number that's wrong, and she will find it, and she will be right. But she... He trailed off. She's been alone a long time. By design, I think, or by habit. Sometimes those are the same thing. Joel looked at Victoria Ashford. She had finished with the Laughing Man, and was moving again that same controlled economy, and then in a gap in the crowd, she looked across the room. She looked directly at him. Not the polite scan of a hostess checking on her guests. A direct, calibrated look. 2 seconds, maybe 3. The look of someone who read rooms the same way he did. Then she looked away. Joel turned back to Warren. Why are you telling me all this? Warren smiled again. The knowing kind. Because you're not consulting, he said, and that's rarer than you think. The evening had a structure. Joel appreciated structure. After the initial gathering, there was dinner round tables assigned seating, which he had not anticipated. He found his card and sat and was reviewing the table. 6 people introductions circling when the chair to his right pulled out and Victoria Ashford sat down. He felt the micro-adjustment in the room's attention without looking up. Heard it in the tiny half-pause in the nearest conversation. She set her clutch on the table, accepted a water glass from the server, and turned to look at him with the same directness she'd shown across the room. You parked on the street, she said. He looked at her. You noticed that. I notice things. Not an apology. A fact. Most people hand their keys to the valet without thinking. You didn't. You parked on the street, you walked the drive, and you've spent the last 40 minutes at the edge of the room with your back to the wall. She paused. Military. Former, he said. Navy. Is it the posture? Partly. Also the way you checked every exit when you came in. She picked up her water. I do the same thing in boardrooms. You check the exits. I identify every way the situation could go wrong before I commit to being in it. She looked at him. You know exactly what I mean. He did. He wasn't sure he wanted to admit it yet. Victoria Ashford, she said, and offered her hand the way a man would, straight across, no angle, no softening. A handshake that meant business. Joel Hartley. What branch? Navy, surface warfare, then special operations support. 12 years. What made you leave? Most people, when they asked, that expected a clean answer. Injury. Retirement. Service complete. They didn't expect the real answer, and the real answer was the kind of thing that had a way of making people uncomfortable in their expensive clothes at their curated dinner parties. He gave her the real answer anyway. He wasn't sure why. "My daughter," he said. "She's 7. She's been 7 for 9 months and I've been home for 14. That means I missed—" He stopped, recalibrated. "She was growing up without me there to see it, and at some point I had to decide which mission was the one that mattered." Victoria Ashford was quiet for a moment. "How long did it take you to decide?" "Longer than it should have." She looked at him, that same direct, calibrated look, but something had shifted slightly in it. Something that wasn't in the boardroom version. "Most men in this room," she said, "would have said something about career transition, or opportunity, or consulting." She put a very slight emphasis on the last word. "I'm not consulting." "No," she said, "you're not." The first course arrived. The conversation at the table picked up around them. Joel turned to his water glass. Victoria Ashford turned to hers. They didn't speak again for several minutes, but he was aware in the specific and precise way he'd been trained to be aware of everything of her stillness beside him. The way it matched his. Two people in a room full of noise, neither one quite in it, both of them in their completely different ways, running on discipline, because they didn't yet know what came after. He stayed 2 hours and 12 minutes. He knew because he tracked it. When he finally stood to leave, she was across the room in conversation with someone else. He noted it without intending, to the same reflex that logged position and movement without being asked. He said his goodbyes, collected his jacket, walked down the long drive in the dark. At his car he stopped, stood for a moment with one hand on the roof. 12 years of the Navy had taught him to be honest with himself in the moments when no one was watching, because those were the moments that mattered. You didn't get to survive the hard things by lying to yourself in the quiet. So here was the truth. He acknowledged standing alone on a residential street in McLean at 9:40 on a Saturday night. Something had happened in there. He didn't know what to call it. It was small and specific, and it had happened in the space of 2 direct looks and a conversation that lasted less than 20 minutes. He had been seen the way he checked exits, the way he stood, the way he made the decision about Lily, and it hadn't felt like exposure. It had felt like recognition. He hadn't felt that since he wore the uniform. He got in the car, he drove home, and he sat in the driveway for 3 minutes, engine off, not going inside yet. Because inside was the ordinary world, the refrigerator making that noise, the resignation letter still on the counter, the second-grade lunchbox by the door. All of it real. All of it his. But for the first time in 14 months, the quiet of it didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something he'd have to figure out how to live. Tight. The text arrived at 11:47 p.m. An unknown number. 4 words, "You left before dessert." He stared at it for a long time. Then he typed back, "I had a curfew." The response came in less than 30 seconds. "First time I've heard that from a man in a $12,000 suit." He looked at his off-the-rack jacket hanging on the closet door. He typed, "It cost $400. A pause, then, "That's either very honest or very impressive. I haven't decided which." Joel Hartley set his phone on the nightstand. He was awake at 3:12, same as always. But for the first time in 14 months, it wasn't the old ghost keeping him up. The text was still on his phone when he woke up. He hadn't deleted it. He'd thought about it, stood in the kitchen at 6 in the morning with his coffee and his thumb hovering over the screen, and then Lily had called from her room that Captain needed breakfast too, and the moment passed and the text stayed. "That's either very honest or very impressive. I haven't decided which." He put the phone face down on the counter and made 2 bowls of cereal. One for Lily. One for Captain, which was an empty bowl that Lily placed ceremonially beside her own, and which Joel had learned not to comment on. Reuben dropped Lily off at 9:30, looking at Joel the way he always looked at him when he wanted information, but was trying to appear casual, which meant he failed at appearing casual approximately 100% of the time. "So," Reuben said, leaning on the doorframe, No, Joel said. I didn't say anything. You were about to. How is it? Fine. Fine, Reuben repeated. You stayed 2 hours. 2 hours and 12 minutes. Reuben's eyebrows went up. I said 1 hour was the deal. You negotiated 1 hour. You stayed 2 hours and 12 minutes, and you're telling me it was fine. Lily. Joel stepped back from the door. Uncle Reuben is leaving. Lily appeared from the hallway and wrapped both arms around Reuben's waist with the focused intensity she brought to physical affection, which was rare and therefore significant. Reuben hugged her back and then looked at Joel over her head with an expression that said, "This conversation is not finished." It wasn't. But Joel was going to make it last as long as possible. After Reuben left, Lily sat at the kitchen table and drew for an hour with the colored pencils she kept in a tin with her name on it in her own handwriting. Careful, deliberate letters, the L slightly larger than the rest. Joel sat across from her with the Sunday paper he never had time to read during the week and read approximately 4 sentences of it. He was thinking about something else. He was aware he was thinking about something else, which was itself unusual. Usually his mind was a list. Things to fix, things to schedule, things Lily needed, things the house needed. Forward motion in a series of discrete tasks, which was the only way he'd found to keep the other stuff, the 3:12 a.m. stuff, from filling the available space. But the other stuff wasn't filling the space this morning. Something else was. He picked up his phone, read the text again, set it back down. "Dad," Lily said without looking up from her drawing. "Yeah. You keep picking up your phone. I know. You always say phones at the table are rude. We're not eating." She looked up. Considered this. "That's technically true," she allowed, and went back to her drawing. He picked up the phone again. He typed, "I've decided." It was honest. He stared at it for 20 seconds. Then he sent it. The reply came in 4 minutes. He was timing it without meaning to. Honest is harder to find than impressive. You should know that's a compliment. He read it twice. Then he did something he hadn't done in 14 months without Lily making him do it first. He smiled, unprompted, alone at a kitchen table on a Sunday morning. Lily looked up immediately, the way she always looked up when something changed in the atmosphere of a room. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. She studied him for a moment with those serious eyes. Then she went back to her drawing, but he caught the small private curve of her mouth before she looked down. 7 years old, and she already knew more than she let on. She got that from him, too. Victoria Ashford did not text first as a rule. She had not texted first in 4 years. Not since the last time she'd made the mistake of allowing someone into her personal space under the impression that he could handle what came with it. The schedule, the expectations, the particular way she moved through the world at a speed and with a precision that most people experienced as cold. He hadn't handled it. He'd lasted 8 months and left a voicemail she'd listened to once and deleted. The voicemail had used the word intimidating 4 times. She'd added it to the list of words that didn't bother her anymore. She had texted Joel Hartley first. She was still working out exactly why. It wasn't the suit she'd been right about the suit, he'd confirmed it without embarrassment, which was itself unusual. Men in that room spent more on their pocket squares than Joel Hartley had spent on the whole package, and most of them needed you to know it. He'd stated the price of his suit, the way he'd stated everything else that evening, like a fact indifferent to its effect. She opened her laptop at 7 a.m. in her home office on the 14th floor of a building she owned in Georgetown and ran a search on his name inside of 6 minutes. Not because she was suspicious, because information was how she operated. You didn't manage $4 billion in assets by waiting for people to tell you who they were. Commander Joel Hartley, USN, Surface Warfare Officer. 2 deployments, Pacific Fleet. Transferred to a Joint Special Operations Support role in Year 8. Commendation, he couldn't find the details of online because the details were classified, which she noted. Separated honorably 14 months ago. No current employer on record. 1 dependent. A daughter, Lily Ann Hartley, age 7. The mother, a brief search produced a name, Carla Voss, and then a clean silence that suggested she was either very private or very gone. Victoria closed that tab without pursuing it. She sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling. She had a Monday morning in 4 hours that involved 3 meetings, a conference call with London, and a board member who had been making quiet noises about strategic direction that she was going to have to address with the kind of directness that board members always said they appreciated and then experienced as uncomfortable when it actually arrived. She had no business thinking about a man she'd spoken to for 20 minutes at a party she'd organized. She picked up her phone and looked at the last text. "I've decided." It was honest. She typed, "I've been called many things in a boardroom. Honest is not usually one of them." She sent it. Then she set the phone face down on her desk and opened the board report. She picked the phone back up 40 seconds later. He'd replied, "That's their loss." 3 words. No punctuation anxiety, no follow-up text walking it back, no ellipsis suggesting he was typing something else. Just 3 words, flat and certain, the way he'd said everything the night before. Victoria Ashford stared at her phone for a moment longer than she'd stared at anything in recent memory that was not a financial document. Then she put it down and went back to the board report, but she read the same paragraph 4 times. Again, he called her on Wednesday, not texted, called. She picked up on the second ring, which she hadn't intended, and then recovered smoothly enough that she didn't think he noticed. "This is Joel Hartley," he said, as if she might not have his number saved. She'd had his number saved since Sunday. "I know," she said. A pause. Not awkward. Considered. She was learning already that Joel Hartley didn't fill silences to be polite. He only spoke when he had something to say. "I wanted to ask you something," he said. "All right. In person, if that's..." Another pause shorter. "I don't do well with important conversations over text." She leaned back in her chair. She was between meetings 12 minutes exactly. She'd checked before she picked up. Why not? Too easy to edit yourself. Too easy to say a version of what you mean instead of the thing you actually mean. She was quiet for a moment. Most people prefer that. "I know, I'm not most people." "No," she said, "you're not." She checked her calendar. "Thursday, 7 p.m. There's a place in DuPont Circle, Correns. Do you know it? I'll find it. It's not loud. Good coffee. I don't drink at meetings." Another pause. Then, "Is that what this is, a meeting?" She opened her mouth and then closed it, which almost never happened. "It's coffee," she said. "Okay," he said. And she could hear something in his voice, not quite a smile, but adjacent to one. The sound of a man who had made his point and didn't need to underline it. "Thursday, 7. He hung up first. That also almost never happened. She sat in her office for the remaining 9 minutes of her break and did not open any documents. Correns was exactly what she'd described, small, not loud. The kind of place that took coffee seriously in a way that didn't require it to be theatrical about it. Joel arrived 6 minutes early, which was the compromise between his instinct to arrive 15 minutes early for everything and the civilian reality that 15 minutes early to a coffee date made you look alarming. He got a table near the back. Not a corner. He'd fought that instinct specifically because the corner was the tactical choice, and this wasn't a tactical situation. He was trying to learn the difference. She walked in at 7 on the dot. No 1-minute buffer, no fashionable delay. 7 p.m. flat coat over one arm, phone in her hand that she dropped into her bag as she crossed the room, which he noted. She wasn't going to be halfway somewhere else. She was here. She sat down across from him and looked at him with that direct, calibrated look that he was starting to understand was not a performance. It was just how she processed things. She looked at you the way he looked at a situation, fully without flinching, gathering data. "You said you wanted to ask me something," she said. He appreciated that too. No warm-up, no weather. "I do," he said, "but I want to say something first." She folded her hands on the table. "All right. I don't do this," he said. I want you to know that. I don't—" He stopped. Found the honest version. "I've been out of the Navy for 14 months. I've been on 2 dates. One of them involved a hardware store, which was partly my fault and partly a misunderstanding about what kind of practical I meant. I am not—" He looked at her. "I am not someone who calls women on Wednesdays and asks to meet in person. That's not— I don't have a version of my life right now where that's a normal thing." Victoria held his gaze. "Then why did you—" "Because I keep thinking about the conversation we had Saturday, and I don't do things I don't understand." He leaned forward slightly. "You noticed I parked on the street. You knew I was military before I told you. You asked me why I left in a way that made me answer honestly when I don't answer honestly by reflex. And then you texted me that night. You said you don't do that." She was very still. "I didn't say that," she said. "You implied it. You said you'd decided it was a compliment. You don't give compliments to people you're indifferent to." A silence. The kind he was learning to read in her, not discomfort exactly. Calculation. She was deciding something. "What do you want to ask me?" she said. "Why did you text me first?" She looked at him for a long moment. The server came and they ordered without looking at the menu. She ordered an Americano. He ordered black coffee, and then the server left and she was still looking at him. "I don't know," she said finally. "That's not a sufficient answer for someone who operates the way you do." Her chin came up slightly, not anger, surprise. "You've known me for 4 days. I've known you for 4 days and 1 dinner conversation. You don't do things you haven't calculated. You said you check the exits before you commit to being in a room. You texted me at 11:47 on a Saturday night, which means you'd been thinking about it for at least 2 hours before you did it. You don't operate on impulse." She held very still for a beat. Then something shifted, small, controlled, but genuine. "You did the same thing I do," she said. "You noticed I parked on the street. You know how I move through a room. You have been processing the same data about me that I've been processing about you, and you're sitting here pretending you called me because you wanted to ask one question." He didn't look away. "I did call because I wanted to ask one question. And the rest of it is context." She laughed. He hadn't heard her laugh before. It was short and genuine and slightly surprised, like it caught her off guard, and she pressed her mouth closed a half second after it escaped, as if on reflex. "Context," she said. "I spent 12 years in the Navy. We brief before we execute. I was briefing." "You were briefing me on why you called me?" "Yes." "Most people," she said carefully, "would have just said hello and asked about my weekend." "I know. I told you. You're not most people." She said it the way he'd said it, flat, factual, a thing observed rather than a thing offered. But she was looking at him differently than she'd been looking at him 60 seconds ago. The calibration was the same, but the angle was different. The coffee arrived. She wrapped both hands around her cup, the way someone does when they're grounding themselves without meaning to show it. "I texted you," she said. "Because the last time I had a conversation in that room that felt real, I don't remember when it was." She looked down at her cup, then back up. "I have a lot of conversations. I'm good at them. I know what people want to hear, and I know how to give them enough of it that we all leave satisfied. I've been doing it since I was 28 years old, and I took over a company that everyone around me was betting would fail within a year." She stopped. "You didn't do that." "Do what?" "Want to hear something comfortable? You told me about Lily, about the decision. You said it like it still hurt, which it clearly does, and you didn't soften it for me. No one—" She stopped again. The controlled exterior held, but something behind it was doing something more complicated. "People don't talk to me like that. Either they're intimidated or they're performing at me. You were just talking." Joel looked at her. "I was just talking." "I know." She picked up her cup. "That's why I texted." He nodded slowly. It was an honest answer. He'd asked for one, and she'd given him one that clearly cost something to say out loud, and he understood that because he'd done the same thing 12 minutes ago. "Okay," he said. "Okay." That's a sufficient answer. She looked at him, as if she was waiting for more. When it didn't come, something in her expression shifted again, this time towards something that might have been relief, if relief was a thing she allowed herself publicly. "You're very strange," she said. "I know," he said. "Lily says I'm weird too." "What do you tell her?" "That weird and broken are different things, and she should learn the difference early." Victoria set down her cup. For a moment she just looked at him. "How old is she?" "7. She has a stuffed rabbit named Captain. She negotiates disputes at recess using actual negotiation tactics, which she did not learn from me. I want to be clear. She figured that out on her own." He paused. "She's better at people than I am." "Most people are better at people than they give themselves credit for," Victoria said. "And most people who say they're bad at it are really just bad at pretending." He looked at her. "Is that what you do? Pretend?" She considered the question with the same seriousness she'd given every other question. "I perform," she said. "There's a difference. Pretending is lying about what you are. Performing is choosing which true thing to show. And right now—" The look she gave him was long and level, and something in it was very close to vulnerable, which he recognized because he'd spent the last 30 minutes being the same thing, and he knew what it cost. "Right now," she said, "I'm not performing." Sir. They stayed for an hour and 40 minutes. Not by intention, he'd told himself an hour the same deal he'd made with Reuben about the mixer, and for the same reason. Containment. A man who didn't know what he was doing in a situation set limits on how long he was in it. But the hour passed without him noticing, and then the 40 minutes on top of it, and when he finally checked his watch it was 8:43. And the coffee shop had gotten quieter around them, in the way places do when the evening crowd thins out. He told her about the Navy, not the classified parts, not the mission specifics, but the structure of it. The way 12 years of that kind of life rewired your nervous system for a particular kind of certainty. You knew your role, you knew your team, you knew what success looked like, and you knew what failure cost. You didn't have to guess at any of it. And coming out of that, stepping from that world into the ordinary world where there was no mission brief, no clear objective, no debrief at the end of the day, was like someone removing the walls of a room while you were still standing in it. She listened without filling his pauses. That was rare. She told him about her father's company. Not the Forbes version, not the turnaround story, the numbers, the strategy that no one had believed in until it worked. She told him about being 28 and sitting in her father's chair for the first time after he'd had his first stroke, looking at the company's balance sheet, and understanding, in about 90 seconds, that it was worse than she'd been told. And then deciding in that same 90 seconds alone, in an office that still smelled like her father's coffee, that she was going to fix it. Not because she was certain she could. Because the alternative was to walk away, and she had never in her life been able to make herself walk away. The first year, she said, I slept on the couch in my office 4 nights a week. Because of the hours. Because I couldn't afford to stop. If I stopped and went home and slept in an actual bed, I'd remember that I was terrified. As long as I was moving, I wasn't terrified. I was just working. He looked at her. That's not a sustainable strategy. No, it's not. She looked at her empty cup. It works long enough to get you through the crisis. And then the crisis becomes the normal, and then you can't remember how to operate without it, so you find the next one. She paused. I've been running on crisis mode for 15 years. He understood that. He understood it in a bone-deep way he hadn't expected to understand anything about her life. Because that was what the Navy was in the end. Structured crisis, managed emergency. You got so good at operating under pressure that the absence of pressure felt like something was wrong, like the silence before something breaks. My daughter, he said slowly, is the first thing in my life in 12 years that isn't a mission. She looked at him. I mean that in a good way, he said. Or I'm trying to. She's not an objective. She's not a problem to solve. She's just... He stopped, found the honest word. She's just Lily. She draws rabbits at the kitchen table, and she eats her cereal in a specific order, and she tells me when I'm being weird, and she's the funniest person I've ever met. And I don't know what I'm doing with her half the time, and none of that is a mission. It's just real." He looked at Victoria. "I'm still figuring out how to operate in things that are just real." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of something that neither of them named, because naming it would have required a precision that the moment wasn't ready for. Then Victoria said quietly, "I've been trying to figure out the same thing for 15 years. He met her eyes. "And," he said. She picked up her empty cup, looked at it, set it back down. "I'll let you know," she said. He walked her to her car, a dark SUV driver waiting, which she'd waved off twice during the evening, and he'd pretended not to notice. At the curb she turned and looked at him. "This wasn't a meeting," she said. "No," he agreed. "It wasn't." She nodded. Not a conclusion, a data point. One of those things she was filing alongside everything else in the particular organized way she filed things. He was starting to understand how her mind worked. It was not unlike his own, which was either a good sign or a complication. Probably both. "Lily has school tomorrow," he said. "I have London at 6 a.m. "Then we both have early mornings." "Yes?" She looked at him for one more moment, that direct, calibrated look that had first caught his attention across a crowded room. Then she said, "Thank you for not being comfortable." He blinked. "For not being comfortable?" "You could have been. You could have kept it easy, talked about the Navy, let me perform, gone home satisfied. Most people do." She held his gaze. "You didn't. You wouldn't have respected it if I had." "No." The smallest pause. "I wouldn't have." She got in the car. He stood on the curb and watched it pull away, and then stood there for an extra moment in the way he'd stood in his driveway last Saturday, not ready yet to move, not sure toward what. His phone buzzed. 6 a.m. London call, 9 p.m. board prep. No clear window until Friday. But I'll make one if you want to have an uncomfortable conversation again. He looked at the message for a long moment on the empty sidewalk in DuPont Circle on a Wednesday night, the city moving around him the way cities do, indifferent and constant. He typed back, "Friday, same place." Her reply was immediate. 7 o'clock. He pocketed the phone and started walking toward his car. Somewhere across the city, Lily was asleep with Captain solving problems in her sleep with her serious face and her colored pencils on the nightstand. In 36 hours, he'd be back at the school pickup line in his truck, and she'd come out the double doors with her backpack too big for her frame, and find him in the line the way she always did, not searching, just knowing the way she always knew. That was real. That was the most real thing in his life. But this, whatever. This was whatever it was becoming in the gap between carefully worded texts and too long coffee conversations, and looks that held a second past comfortable. This was starting to feel like something he hadn't felt since he wore the uniform. Like something worth being present for, not surviving. Present. Friday came the way good things came when Joel Hartley was involved quietly without ceremony and slightly ahead of schedule. He was at Corin's at 6:52. He ordered black coffee and sat in the same chair he'd sat in on Thursday, which he told himself was coincidence and knew was not. There was a particular comfort in returning to a position that had worked. 12 years of the Navy had made that instinct automatic. You found the ground that held, and you stood on it. She walked in at 7 exactly. Same coat, different scarf, dark burgundy this time, which she pulled loose at the door with the efficient one-handed motion of someone who had long ago stopped thinking about the small logistics of being cold. She spotted him immediately, which he noticed because the table was not the most obvious one in the room, and she found it in under 3 seconds. She sat down. The server appeared. She ordered her Americano without looking at the menu. "London went long," she said by way of hello. "How long?" 2 hours over. The counterparty had concerns. She said the word concerns the way people say it, when what they mean is objections they intend to outlast. They always have concerns. The concerns are never really about what they say they're about. What are they about? She looked at him. Power. They're always about power. Someone in the room feels like they're losing it, and they manufacture concerns to slow things down until they can figure out how to take it back. She picked up her water. I let them talk for 40 minutes. Then I showed them the numbers they didn't want me to have, and the concerns went away. You had the numbers ahead of time. I always have the numbers ahead of time. He looked at her. Do you ever walk into a room without already knowing how it ends? She opened her mouth, closed it. It was the same half-second pause he'd noticed on Thursday, the moment before she gave him the honest answer instead of the sufficient one. Not professionally, she said. And personally. She held his gaze. I'm sitting here, aren't I? He accepted that. It was more than she gave most people, and he understood it as such. They talked for 20 minutes about nothing consequential. A story she told about a board member who had sent her a 12-paragraph email about office chair ergonomics as a proxy for a conversation about his diminishing influence, which was so specific and so absurd that Joel laughed out loud, and the sound surprised both of them, because it was full and real, and the kind of laugh you don't manufacture. She watched him laugh with an expression he couldn't quite categorize. Not quite a smile. Something more private than that. Then she said without transition, "Tell me about Lily's mother." He went still. Not visibly, he'd been trained out of visible stillness, which meant people couldn't always tell when a question had landed. But she could tell. He was learning that about her. She caught things. "That's a significant left turn," he said. "I know. You don't have to answer. I know I don't." He turned his coffee cup once on the table, clockwise. A habit he'd had since OCS, and never fully broken. "Her name is Carla. We were together for 3 years. She got pregnant with Lily, not planned, but not unwelcome. Not by me, anyway." He stopped. "She stayed for 2 years. The deployments were hard. The distance was hard. The way I came back from deployments and needed 3 days of silence before I could be a person again, that was hard." He looked at the table. She left when Lily was 2. Not dramatically, no fight, no ultimatum. She just packed while I was on a rotation and left a note that said she needed a life she could actually live in. He was quiet for a moment. "She sends Lily a card on her birthday. She's in Portland now. Has a good life from what I can tell. I don't have anger about it anymore." He looked up. "But Lily's never asked about her, and I don't know if that's because she's 7 and it hasn't occurred to her yet, or because she already understands something that she doesn't have words for, and that—" He stopped. "That scares you more than anything you did in the Navy," Victoria said quietly. He looked at her. "Yes," he said. She was quiet for a moment. Not the calculating quiet. The other kind, the kind he'd started to recognize as her version of sitting with something. "My mother left too," she said. "Different circumstances. She didn't leave my father, she left the life. The expectation of it. She was 51, I was 23. She called me from a hotel in Santa Fe and explained that she had given 30 years to a version of herself she no longer recognized, and she needed to go find out who she actually was." A pause. She said it very calmly, like a board presentation. "What did you say?" "I said I support you completely." And then I hung up and didn't speak to her for 8 months. "And now?" "Now we have lunch twice a year and talk about everything except the thing. She has a pottery studio in Taos. She seems—" Victoria paused carefully, genuinely happy, which is the most disorienting thing about it. "Because you can't be angry at someone for being happy. No, you can't." She looked at her coffee. "But you can be angry at them for a very long time for what it cost you to get to the point where you can sit across from them at lunch and be grateful for their happiness." Joel looked at her. "Is that where you are?" "Grateful." "I'm working on it." He nodded. It was the most honest thing either of them had said in 2 days, and it was also somehow the most natural. Like they'd established a frequency, and the conversation had found it on its own. "Lily is going to be fine," he said. It wasn't comfort exactly. It was a thing he'd decided, a position he'd taken and held. "How do you know?" "Because she has a father who shows up. Whatever else she doesn't have, she has someone who shows up every single day and makes the cereal and sews the rabbit and sits through the recess stories. He met Victoria's eyes. Carla leaving was the thing that happened. Me staying is the choice I make every day. Lily knows the difference. Kids always know the difference. They might not have words for it, but they know. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Then she said very quietly, "I wish someone had told me that when I was 7. The weight of that sentence sat between them, and neither of them moved to fill it, because some things need the space they take up. Saturday was the first time they saw each other outside of Corin's. It was not planned, which meant it was exactly the kind of thing that made Joel Hartley's nervous system sit up and pay attention. Reuben had called Friday night to tell him the baseball game for Lily's rec league had been moved to Upton Park, which was 15 minutes from downtown, and Joel had shown up at 9:15 with Lily in her uniform that was slightly too big, the league ordered by age not size. And Lily had inherited his lean build and a lawn chair he'd had since before the Navy and somehow never lost. He set up the chair on the third base side, which was where the left-handed batters needed the most support. Lily was left-handed. He'd checked the lineup. He was 60 seconds into reviewing the batting order in his head when he heard someone say his name. He turned. Victoria Ashford was standing 10 feet away in a light jacket and dark jeans, holding a coffee cup, looking at him with the specific expression of someone who has been caught in a situation they did not orchestrate and are now deciding how to handle it. He stood up from the lawn chair. "What are you doing here?" "My associate director's daughter is on the opposing team," she said. "He invited me weeks ago and I—" She stopped. "I said yes because I was trying to be a normal person." He looked at her. "How's that going?" he said. She looked around at the assembled parents, the folding chairs, the coolers with juice boxes, the woman next to Joel who was knitting, while also somehow tracking 3 different children simultaneously. "Ask me in an hour," she said. He gestured at the empty space beside his chair. She looked at the folding lawn chair situation for approximately 1 second, and then she sat down on the grass cross-legged, coffee in hand, like it was a thing she did regularly, which he was certain it was not. Lily came out of the dugout, at that moment spotted Joel raised one hand in the specific way she had, not a wave more, an acknowledgement, a tiny commander checking that her support staff was in position, and then stopped. She looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at her. 2 seconds of pure, unmediated assessment. Joel held his breath. Then Lily walked over, stood in front of Victoria and said, "Are you Dad's friend from the party?" Victoria blinked. "He told you about me." "He didn't tell me. He smiled at his phone Sunday morning." Lily said it with the authority of someone presenting evidence. "He only does that for Uncle Reuben, and Uncle Reuben was standing right there." She paused. "I'm Lily." "I know," Victoria said. "I'm Victoria." Lily studied her. "That's a long name." "Yes, some people shorten it." "To what?" "Tori. But I don't usually use it." Lily considered this. "I'll call you Victoria," she decided. Shortened names change what things mean. She looked at Joel. "I'm up 4th in the lineup. Don't look at your phone." "I never look at my phone during your games." "You looked at it during the game against Riverside." "That was an emergency." "What emergency?" "The refrigerator repairman." Lily absorbed this. "Okay," she allowed. That was valid. And then she turned and went back to the dugout with the focused purpose of someone with much more important things to manage. Joel sat back down in his lawn chair. Victoria was looking in the direction Lily had gone with an expression he hadn't seen on her before. It was open in a way that the boardroom version of her face wasn't open, not unguarded exactly, more like momentarily, voluntarily unarmored. "She's extraordinary," Victoria said. "Yeah," Joel said. "I know." "She assessed me in about 15 seconds. She assesses everyone. She doesn't do it to be rude. She's just—" He paused. "She needs to understand what things are before she can relax around them." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then, "She gets that from you." He looked at her. "Apparently," he said. The game started. For the next hour and 40 minutes, Joel Hartley sat in a lawn chair at a children's recreational baseball game and watched his daughter play third base with the focused intensity she brought to everything. Victoria sat beside him on the grass. She did not check her phone once. She asked questions, not the polite obligatory questions of an outsider performing interest, but specific real questions. Why does Lily hold the bat that way? What does that signal to the pitcher? Why did the coach pull the left fielder in for this batter? He answered all of them. Some of the answers led to longer conversations that had nothing to do with baseball, the way conversations do when you're actually paying attention to each other, and not just filling the space. When Lily came up to bat in the third inning, Joel leaned forward in his chair without thinking. He didn't make noise. He wasn't a noise-making sports parent, but he was present in a way that was physical, visible total. Lily hit a line drive to left field and made it to second base. Joel exhaled. Victoria was watching him, not the field. "You were holding your breath," she said. "No, I wasn't." "Joel." "Fine. Yes." "She's fine. She made it to second." "I know. I still held my breath." He looked at her. "You don't breathe when the thing you love is in motion. You just wait." He paused. "You wait to find out if the world is going to hold up today." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "Is that what it's like?" she asked. And the question was real, not sympathetic, not polite. She genuinely didn't know, and she genuinely wanted to. "Every day," he said. "Every single day." She looked at the field. At Lily on second base, hands on her knees, serious face on reading the next play. "I never had anyone feel that way about me," Victoria said. It came out quietly, like something said in passing, like she hadn't entirely meant to say it out loud. He looked at her. She was still watching the field. "Your father," he said carefully, "was busy building the thing I later had to save." Not bitter, just factual. "He loved me in the way that very driven people love their children, with great intention and not enough presence. He meant to show up more. He always meant to. But meaning to is not the same as doing." "No, it's not." She finally looked at him. "That's why I've always been impressed by intentional people, not brilliant people. Brilliant is common. People who decide to do something and then actually do it. That's rare." He held her gaze. "Is that what you think I am? You left a 12-year career," she said. "You came home, and you stay home. You sew the rabbit's eye back on. You show up to the games. You hold your breath because she's running." She paused. "That's not accidental, Joel. That's architecture. You built that on purpose." He didn't know what to say. Not because he didn't have words, but because no one had ever described what he did that way. And hearing it described that way did something to the place in his chest that usually stayed locked. He turned back to the field. "She's going to try to steal third," he said. "How do you know?" "She always does when the pitcher's slow to reset. She's been timing him from second base since she got there. Watch her feet." They both watched. Lily's feet shifted. The pitcher wound up. And Lily went fast, low, decisive. Safe. Joel exhaled again. Victoria laughed beside him, the real laugh, the surprised one, and this time she didn't press her mouth closed afterward. She just let it be there. After the game, Lily found them on the sideline and delivered a comprehensive breakdown of every decision made by both teams in the last 3 innings, which took 11 minutes, and which Joel listened to completely, and which Victoria listened to with the focused attention of someone sitting in an important briefing. When Lily finished, she looked at Victoria. "Did you understand all of that?" "Most of it," Victoria said. "Explain the stolen base again." Lily's expression shifted just slightly, the way it shifted when she encountered someone worth explaining things to. She explained the stolen base. Victoria asked a follow-up question that was smart enough that Lily paused before answering it. Joel watched this exchange and felt something he had no military classification for, and no civilian language ready yet. something that was too big for the moment it was living in. "Can Victoria come for pizza?" Lily asked, looking at Joel. He looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at him. "You don't have to," he said. And he meant it not as deflection, but as genuine permission. She had a life. She had London calls and board prep and 12-paragraph emails about ergonomics. "I want to," she said, and she meant it too. He could tell because she said it the same way she said everything that was true, flat, direct, indifferent to its effect. The pizza place was loud in the way that pizza places near recreational leagues are loud on Saturday afternoons. Kids, families, noise without structure. Joel navigated it automatically. Corner booth, backs to the wall, clear sightline to the entrance. Old habits. Victoria slid in across from him and Lily without comment, and picked up the laminated menu and read it with the same focused attention she'd given the baseball breakdown. "They have a white pizza," she said. "The red's better," Lily said. "The sauce is from a can, but Dad puts red pepper flakes on it and it's better." Victoria looked at Joel. "You improved the sauce with red pepper flakes." "It works?" "At a pizza restaurant. They leave the shakers on the table. It's fine." She shook her head, not disapproving, something closer to delighted, which was an expression he was learning to look for because it was rare and genuine. They ordered. The noise moved around them. Lily talked about the game, about a book she was reading, about a disagreement she'd had with her teacher about the correct interpretation of a word problem in math, which she described in detail and which she had clearly not yet finished processing. Victoria listened, not patiently, that implied it required effort. She listened like Lily was saying something worth hearing, which meant Lily talked more and talked better, and by the time the pizza arrived, Lily was leaning slightly forward on her elbows in the way she did when she was fully comfortable, and the serious face had relaxed into something younger and softer. Joel watched and didn't say anything, and let the moment be what it was. At some point, Lily looked at Victoria and said unprompted, "Do you have any kids?" "No," Victoria said. "Do you want some?" "Lily," Joel said. "It's a real question," Lily said, not moving her eyes from Victoria. Victoria held Lily's gaze. "I think," she said carefully, "that I spent a long time not thinking about it, which isn't the same as not wanting it." Lily absorbed this with the seriousness it deserved. "That's an honest answer," she said. "I try." Lily nodded, took a piece of pizza, ate it, then looked at Victoria again. "You can come to the next game too," she said. "If you want. We're playing Riverside. They're difficult." "Your father mentioned Riverside. They have a pitcher with a very deceptive windup." Lily looked at Joel. "We should talk about a strategy." "We will," Joel said. "Finish your pizza." She finished her pizza. She also finished the conversation about Riverside strategy, which took 12 minutes and covered 3 distinct approaches, and which Victoria contributed to with a comment about misdirection that made Lily look at her with the same expression she'd given the follow-up question about the stolen base recalibrating upward. On the drive home, Lily fell asleep in the back seat 20 minutes from the house. She did this, sometimes went from full operation to completely offline the way very young children and very disciplined people did, because they spent everything they had while they were awake and had nothing left to spend when they stopped. Joel drove in the quiet. He thought about the day, the lawn chair, Victoria on the grass, Lily on second base, the pizza, the conversation about wanting things you'd spent time not thinking about. He thought about what Victoria had said, that she'd never had anyone hold their breath for her, and he thought about how she'd said it, quietly, not asking for anything, just letting the truth of it exist in the air between them. He thought about what it cost saying a true thing like that out loud. He'd recognize the cost because he paid it too every time he opened his mouth in her presence and said the real version instead of the edited one. He parked in front of the house. Lily didn't stir. He sat for a moment with the engine off. His phone buzzed. "Victoria, she's remarkable. You know that. He typed back. Yeah, she told me herself so. She did not. Exact words, Dad. I'm remarkable, and I need you to acknowledge that more. A pause. Then, she absolutely said that. 3rd grade, last October. I believe you completely. He looked at the text, looked at Lily in the rearview mirror still out cold, head tilted at the specific angle that meant she was going to wake up with a stiff neck, and blame him for not adjusting her seat, which he probably should have done. He typed, she asked if you were coming to the next game. The reply took longer this time. 30 seconds, maybe 40. What did you tell her? He looked at his daughter. At her hand slack in her lap, the game dirt still on her uniform knee. Captain the Rabbit, somehow already present because she'd grabbed him from the bag before she fell asleep in that automatic way kids had of finding their comfort things. He typed, I told her I'd ask. Another pause. Then ask. He smiled at the phone, the same unprompted, alone in the quiet smile as Sunday morning. The kind that arrived before you could decide whether to let it. He typed, will you come to the next game? Her reply was immediate this time. No pause. No calculation. Yes. He put the phone in his pocket, got out of the car, opened the back door carefully, the way you do when you're trying not to wake something good, and picked Lily up the way he'd been picking her up since she was 2 pounds lighter, and the world was a different shape, one arm under her knees, her head against his shoulder, Captain hanging from her slack hand. She didn't wake. She made the small sound she made when she was moved in her sleep. A sound that had no name except that it meant, I know you're here, which was in the end the only sound in the world that undid him completely. He carried her inside, put her to bed, tucked Captain in beside her, stood in the doorway. This was the thing no Navy mission had ever asked of him. This was the thing he'd had no training for and no manual on, and no commanding officer to debrief him afterward. Just a small room, a small girl, a rabbit with one eye that had been re-sewn 3 times. Just this. Just real. He pulled the door to almost closed and stood in the hallway, and for the first time in 14 months, the quiet of the house did not feel like something to survive. It felt like something he was slowly learning to deserve. His phone was still warm in his pocket. 1 yes on a screen. It was a small thing. It was not a small thing at all. She came to the Riverside game. She arrived at 9:58, 2 minutes before first pitch, which Joel had already accepted as her version of early. She had a coffee in each hand. His was black, no sugar, which she'd remembered without asking. And she found him on the third base side without looking for him, the same way she'd found the table at Corin's. Like she'd already mapped where he'd be. She handed him the coffee. She sat down on the grass beside his chair. He didn't say anything about the coffee. Neither did she. Lily came out of the dugout, spotted Victoria, and raised one hand, the same commander's acknowledgement she gave Joel, which meant something, because Lily did not distribute that gesture to people she hadn't decided about. Victoria raised her hand back. Same gesture, exact same angle. Joel looked at her. What? She said, eyes on the field. Nothing, he said. You're doing the thing where you notice something and decide not to say it. I notice a lot of things I decide not to say. I know, it's infuriating. She took a sip of her coffee. Say it anyway. He looked at Lily, who had assumed her position at third base and was already reading the opposing team's setup with the focused intensity that made her coach occasionally forget she was 7. You gave her the acknowledgement, he said. What acknowledgement? The hand thing. She does it to me every game. She's never done it to anyone else. He paused. You gave it back in the exact same way. Victoria was quiet for a moment. She established a signal, she said. You return a signal in kind. That's basic communication. That's not basic anything, Joel said. Most adults would wave, or smile, or make a big enthusiastic production of it because she's a kid, and adults think kids need productions. He looked at her. You just gave it back. Exact same register. She didn't answer right away. He watched her process it, that slight internal shift he'd learned to read, the moment before she allowed herself to acknowledge something that mattered. "She's not a kid who needs productions," Victoria said finally. "No," Joel agreed. "She's not." The game started. They watched Lily navigate the Riverside pitcher for 2 innings before she got her first at-bat. The pitcher had the deceptive wind-up Lily had analyzed at the pizza place, a hitch in the delivery that made the release point harder to track. Joel had seen Lily study it from the dugout head, tilted at the same angle it went when she was solving the math word problem she disagreed with her teacher about. When Lily stepped up to the plate, Victoria put her coffee down. Joel noticed. He didn't say anything. Lily took the first pitch. Ball. She'd been looking for something, hadn't found it, let it go. Second pitch. She fouled it off deliberately. Joel could tell, buying herself another look at the windup. Third pitch. She waited an extra half-beat past what looked comfortable, adjusted for the hitch, and hit it clean into the gap between first and second. She made it to first, standing up. Victoria exhaled beside him. Audible. Unguarded. Joel looked at her. She looked at him. Something in her expression was slightly undone. Not much, just at the edges. The boardroom version had slipped about 3 degrees. "You held your breath," he said. "I did not." "Victoria." She pressed her lips together. "Fine," she said. "I held my breath." He turned back to the field. He didn't smile, but it was close. After the game, Lily's team won 7-4, which Lily reported with comprehensive analysis on the drive to lunch. They sat at the same pizza place, same corner booth, same red pepper flakes. Lily ordered for the table without being asked, and was not wrong about what anyone wanted, which was the kind of thing Joel had stopped being surprised by, and which made Victoria set down her water glass and look at Lily with an expression that said she was recalibrating again. It was a good afternoon. The uncomplicated kind that Joel had almost forgotten existed, where the hours passed without needing to be managed, and the people in the room were exactly who they were, and nothing required maintenance. He was learning that good afternoons were the ones he needed to pay attention to. In the Navy, the good stretches were the ones you rested in because something was always coming. He was trying to learn that civilian good stretches didn't always mean something was coming. Sometimes they just meant the day was good. He was still learning. Yes. What came when it came from a direction he hadn't checked. It was 3 weeks after the Riverside game. 3 weeks of coffee and late texts and 2 more dinners that weren't meetings. And one Sunday afternoon, where Victoria had appeared at his front door with a bag of groceries and the information that she had learned to make exactly one meal, her grandmother's pot roast recipe, which she had not made in 6 years, and that she intended to make it tonight if he had a Dutch oven. He had a Dutch oven. Of course he had a Dutch oven. She'd made the pot roast in his kitchen, while Lily sat on the counter and provided commentary on the process, which Victoria accepted without deflection and incorporated without condescension, adjusting the seasoning when Lily suggested it, explaining each step when Lily asked, treating the entire enterprise as a collaborative project between 2 equally serious people who happened to have 40 years and $4 billion between them. The pot roast was excellent. Joel had eaten it and said so, and Victoria had looked at her plate with a small private expression that he understood as the equivalent of what Lily called being really actually happy, as opposed to performing happiness, which were different things that Lily had opinions about. He thought about that expression when the photograph appeared. He was at the grocery store on a Tuesday morning. Parent-teacher conferences were Thursday. Lily needed new colored pencils because she'd used the red down to a stub and was bereft about it, and the refrigerator had finally surrendered after months of making that noise, and he needed to restock when his phone started going. Not one notification. Several in rapid succession. Ruben's name first, then a number he didn't recognize. Then Ruben again. He stood in the cereal aisle and opened the first message. Ruben had sent a link. Below it, "Call me when you see this. Don't freak out." The instruction not to freak out was, in Joel's experience, the single most reliable indicator that freaking out was the appropriate response. He opened the link. It was a gossip column. Mid-tier, the kind that covered DC society events and business circles and the social overlap between them. The headline was, "Ashford spotted at youth baseball new mystery man." There was a photograph. Taken from a distance, slightly blurred at the edges, the kind of photo that came from a phone camera at maximum zoom. It showed the sideline of a baseball field. Victoria in her light jacket sitting cross-legged on the grass. Joel in the lawn chair beside her, both of them looking at the field. Lily was not in the photograph. He checked that first immediately before he read a single word of the article. Lily was not in it. He read the article. It was brief. It said, Victoria Ashford, CEO of Ashford Capital, had been photographed at a children's recreational baseball game in Annapolis. It described the unknown man in the lawn chair as a mystery companion. It speculated with the specific breezy malice of that type of writing about whether this represented a new chapter for the notoriously private billionaire. Joel put his phone in his pocket. He stood in the cereal aisle for 30 seconds. Then he called Victoria. She picked up on the first ring, which told him she'd already seen it. "Are you all right?" he said. A pause. "I'm fine. Are you?" "Lily's not in it?" "I know, I checked." "Okay." He breathed. "Okay. Are you all right?" "This isn't the first time," she said. Her voice was controlled, the boardroom voice which he'd learned to distinguish from her actual voice. She was performing steady. "It comes with the territory. Someone at the field must have recognized me. I should have anticipated it. You came to a children's baseball game. I know. You weren't doing anything wrong. You were watching a kid play baseball. Joel." The edge in her voice was small but real. "I know that. It doesn't change what's out there." He was quiet for a moment. He understood what she was saying. He also understood the thing she wasn't saying, which was that the photograph was evidence of something she hadn't yet decided how to be public about. And evidence in public is a different thing than a choice made in private. "What do you need?" he said. Another pause. Longer this time. "I don't know," she said. And that the honest admission of not knowing from a woman who always knew told him more than the photograph had. "Call me later," he said. "When you're done pretending to be fine." Silence. "I'm not pretending," she said. "Victoria." A beat. Then quietly, "I'll call you later." She hung up. He stood in the cereal aisle a moment longer. Then he got the colored pencils and restocked the refrigerator and drove home, and did not check the article again. He did not check it again because reading it more than once would not change it, and because the part of it that mattered Lily's absence from the frame was already confirmed, and because the rest of it was noise. He'd operated in environments where the noise could kill you if you let it be louder than the signal. He knew the difference. The signal was something real was being built, slowly, carefully, the way you build anything that has to hold weight. The noise was a photograph from a zoom lens at a baseball game. He kept the two things separate. He was good at that. Lily, as it turned out, was not. Not because she'd seen the article. She hadn't. She was 7. She didn't read gossip columns. She was barely tolerating chapter books about anything that wasn't animals or sports, but because she was Lily, and Lily read atmospheres the way her father read rooms. She came home from school Thursday afternoon after the parent-teacher conference, which had been good. Her teacher had used the word exceptional 3 times, and once had seemed almost alarmed by it, and sat across from Joel at the kitchen table and said nothing for 4 minutes, which was long for Lily. "What's wrong with Victoria?" she said. Joel looked up from the conference notes he'd been reviewing. "What makes you think something's wrong with Victoria? You've been on your phone more since Tuesday." "I'm always on my phone." "Not in that way. In the worried way. Like when Captain's eye was missing, and you thought I didn't notice you looking for it for 2 days before you told me you found it." He set down the notes. "Nothing's wrong with Victoria," he said. "There's a situation that's being handled." Lily looked at him with the expression she used when she found an adult's word choice insufficient. "What situation?" "Someone took a photograph at your baseball game. of me and Victoria, and put it in the newspaper." Lily was quiet for a moment. "Was I in it?" "No, just us." She thought about this with the focused attention she gave everything. "Is Victoria upset? I think she's—" He stopped, found the honest version. "I think she's dealing with it." "But is she upset?" Joel looked at his daughter, 7 years old, eating a cracker, waiting for an honest answer because she always waited for honest answers, and she always knew when she wasn't getting one. "Yeah," he said, "a little." Lily nodded, ate another cracker. "You should go see her," she said. "She has a busy week. Dad?" Lily set down the cracker. "When Captain's eye was missing, I didn't want to talk about it, but I wanted you to look for it." She held his gaze. "That's not the same thing." He looked at his daughter for a long moment. "When did you get this smart?" he said. "3rd grade," she said, and picked up her cracker. He texted Victoria that evening. "I'm coming over Saturday morning. I'm bringing coffee. You don't have to talk about anything." Her reply took 20 minutes. He waited without checking it more than twice, which was discipline of a different kind. "I live in a building with a doorman. I'll charm him. He's 73 and deeply unimpressed by charm. I'll bring him coffee too." A pause. Then, 9 o'clock. He showed up at 8:58 with 3 coffees and told the doorman, whose name he'd looked up was Gerald, that the large dark roast was his. No charge, and Gerald looked at him for a long moment with the specific eyes of a man who had been managing the front door of a luxury building for 22 years and had seen every approach attempted, and then he buzzed Victoria's apartment without being asked and said, "There's a man here who did his homework," which Joel filed as the best possible endorsement. Victoria opened the door in a sweater and no armor. Not literally she was dressed, she was put together, but the version of her that opened the door was the coffee on the grass version, not the boardroom version, and he'd learned to tell them apart. She stepped back to let him in. He walked into her apartment, handed her the coffee, and sat down in the chair across from the couch in a way that said, "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere, and you don't have to perform." She sat on the couch, pulled her knees up, wrapped both hands around the cup. They sat like that for a while. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that meant they were both in the room, in the same way, at the same frequency, not needing it to be anything else. "I had a board member call me Friday," she said finally. "About the photo. About optics." She said the word the way she said concerns, knowing what it was really about. He wanted to discuss whether my personal visibility was aligned with the company's image. She looked at her coffee. He used the phrase aligned with the company's image 4 times in 12 minutes. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that my personal life was not a line item in his portfolio, and that if he had concerns about company performance, he was welcome to schedule a formal review, and that in the meantime, I would continue to attend baseball games, and I expected him to have the numbers I requested by end of week." Joel looked at her. "How did he take it?" "He said of course 6 times and hung up very quickly." A pause. "He'll bring it up again at the next board meeting. He'll find a procedural way to do it so it doesn't look personal." "And you'll be ready." "I'm always ready." She said it without satisfaction, just fact. "That's the part that's—" She stopped, turned the cup in her hands. "I'm always ready for the professional version of the problem. I've been handling that for 15 years. I know every move on that board, and I know 3 moves ahead of every person on it." She looked at him. "What I'm not ready for is what it does to the rest of it." He held her gaze. "To this." "To this," she said. "To showing up to a baseball game and sitting on the grass and holding my breath when a 7-year-old runs the bases and having that be—" She stopped again. "Having that be the thing that ends up in a column." "It wasn't the thing in the column," he said. "The column was about me." "You know what I mean." "I do." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You're saying that you stepped out of the controlled version of your life for one morning, and the world noticed, and now you're deciding whether it was worth it." She didn't answer, which was an answer. "Victoria," he said, "look at me." She looked at him. "I spent 12 years in the Navy making risk assessments," he said. "I know what they look like from the inside. You're sitting here running the numbers on whether what's happening between us is worth the exposure, and I understand that, and I'm not going to tell you the math is wrong." He paused. "But I need you to know what you're actually calculating." "What am I calculating?" "Whether you can afford to be seen." He held her gaze. "Not by the column, not by the board member, by Lily, by me. Whether you can afford to be seen as someone who sits on the grass and holds her breath and comes back for the next game and makes pot roast in someone else's kitchen." He let that sit for a moment. Because that's what was in the photograph, not a scandal, just a person being a person on a Saturday morning. The silence that followed was long. Victoria looked at him with the direct, calibrated look that he knew by now was how she looked at the things that were real, the things that had her full, unedited attention. "You scare me," she said. Not the way people said things to be dramatic. The flat, factual way she said things that were true. "I know," he said. "That's not a comfortable thing to admit." "I know that too. I built everything I have by never being the most afraid person in the room," she said. "I was always the one who held the ground, who didn't flinch, who knew 3 moves ahead." She looked at her coffee cup. "I have no moves with you. I have no 3 moves ahead. I just have—" She stopped. Her jaw tightened slightly. Not anger. Something more like the look of someone standing at a ledge who came prepared for every contingency except the one where they actually jump. "I just have right now. This. And it's the one thing I don't know how to manage." Joel set his coffee down. "You don't have to manage it," he said. "I manage everything." "I know, but this isn't a board. This isn't London. This isn't a 12-paragraph email about ergonomics." He looked at her. "This is just me, in your living room on a Saturday morning with coffee that's probably getting cold." He paused. "You don't have to be 3 moves ahead of me. I'm not trying to take anything from you." She looked at him for a long moment. "What are you trying to do?" she said. He thought about Lily at the kitchen table. Captain's eye. "Looking for something you won't admit is lost needing someone to look for it anyway." "I'm trying to show up," he said. "That's all I know how to do. I show up and I stay, and I don't manage it. I just—" He met her eyes. "I just do it. Every day. The same way I do it for Lily. Because the alternative is the thing I can't live with, which is being someone who was supposed to be there and wasn't." The silence was different this time. Not the calculating kind. Not the processing kind. Just still. The way a room goes still when something true has been said in it and the air needs a moment to adjust. Victoria unfolded her knees from the couch, set her feet on the floor, sat forward so that the distance between them was smaller. "I missed a call from Lily last Tuesday," she said. He blinked. "She called you. She has my number. I gave it to her after the Riverside game. She said she might have questions about strategy." A pause. "I was in London prep and I missed it. I called back 40 minutes later. She told me it was fine." Victoria looked at him. "It wasn't fine. I could hear it. She didn't say anything to me. She wouldn't. She's protecting you." Victoria held his gaze. "She's 7 years old, and she's protecting you from knowing she was disappointed because she doesn't want you to feel like it's your fault." She paused. "She is the most extraordinary person I have met in 15 years of being in rooms full of extraordinary people, and I missed her call because I was managing a situation that will not matter in 6 months." Joel was very still. "I need you to understand something," Victoria said. "I'm not good at this. I'm not practiced at it. I spent 15 years getting very, very good at the wrong version of discipline, the kind that keeps everything at a distance and calls it strength." She looked at him with the full, unguarded, unarmored version of that direct look. "But I called Lily back in 40 minutes, not because it was strategic, because I couldn't not." He held her gaze. "I know," he said. "I'm going to miss things," she said. I'm going to have London calls and board meetings and 12-paragraph emails, and I'm going to miss things. And I cannot promise you that won't happen. I know. I need you to actually know that, not accept it as a concept. Know it. Victoria. He looked at her steadily. I was on deployment when Lily was 2. I missed 18 months. I know what it costs. I know it from both sides. He paused. I'm not asking you to be someone different. I'm asking you to be here when you're here. She absorbed that. Then she said, I called her back in 40 minutes. I know, he said. That's not nothing. That's everything. She looked at him for a long moment. The kind of look that meant she was deciding something, not calculating, not strategizing. Deciding. The way you decide things that you're going to have to live with afterward, which meant you had to be honest about what you actually wanted, not what was safe to want. I want to come back, she said. To the games, to the pizza, to... She gestured slightly vaguely at the space between them. To this. Okay, he said. The board member is going to be a problem. You'll handle him. The column will write about it again. Probably. My schedule is not going to get easier. I know. And She stopped. You have Lily to think about. And you're just getting your footing. And this is complicated, and I don't know. I genuinely do not know how to do this. I want you to understand that I am coming into this without a plan. Joel Hartley looked at the woman across from him. The $4 billion empire builder who slept on her office couch for a year at 28, who made pot roast in his kitchen, who gave a 7-year-old the commander's acknowledgement in exactly the right register, who called back in 40 minutes, who sat on the grass at a baseball game and held her breath. Victoria, he said. I came to a cocktail party in a $400 suit and asked for a club soda. I don't have a plan either. Something shifted in her face. Not breaking, she wasn't a person who broke, but opening. The specific, careful, deliberate opening of someone who has kept something locked for a very long time and is choosing with full knowledge of what it means to turn the key. Okay, she said. One word, the same word she'd used in the text 3 weeks ago. Yes, I'll come to the game. Okay, let's do this without a plan. He reached across and put his hand over hers where it rested on the couch between them. Not a grand gesture, just contact. Just, I'm here. Same as yesterday. Same as tomorrow. She turned her hand over. They sat like that in her living room on a Saturday morning with the coffee getting cold, the city moving 42 floors below the board member, who would be a problem, and the column that would write about it again, and all the complications of two people with complicated lives, finding each other in the space between who they used to be and who they were still becoming. And neither one of them managed it. They just let it be real. Outside, it had started to rain. Joel noticed it against the windows, not because he was looking for it, but because he noticed things. Old habit. The world changing its conditions, requiring a new read. He looked at the rain. He looked at Victoria. She was looking at him. Lily's going to want a full report, he said. Victoria laughed, the real one, the surprised one, the one that didn't get pressed back. What do I tell her? He thought about it. Tell her the Riverside strategy worked. She tilted her head. Did it? He looked at her, at the hand still turned over in his, at the rain, at everything. Yeah, he said. I think it did. The rain lasted 3 days. Joel knew because he tracked weather the way he tracked everything, not obsessively, but with the steady background awareness of a man trained to understand that conditions change, and preparation is the difference between a mission that holds and one that breaks. By Monday morning, the streets were wet, and the sky had gone the particular flat gray of late autumn in Maryland, and Lily had gone to school in her yellow raincoat with Captain tucked into the top of her backpack, because she'd decided he needed an outing. Joel stood in the kitchen after the school run and drank his coffee and thought about Saturday. He thought about Victoria's hand turning over in his, the way she'd laughed, the rain on the window, the specific careful quality of the silence when two people stop managing something and just let it exist between them. He'd experienced that silence in exactly one other context in his life. The silence after a mission was complete when the team was back aboard and the threat was resolved, and nobody needed to say anything because the doing of it was enough. A silence that meant we held. It worked. We're still here. He hadn't expected to find that silence in a living room on a Saturday morning. He poured a second cup of coffee, which he rarely did, and didn't analyze it. His phone rang. Ruben. Well, Ruben said. Good morning to you too. It's been 4 days since the photograph thing and you've given me nothing. Nothing, Joel. I've been patient. You've been patient for 4 days. That's a personal record. How is she? Joel looked at his coffee. She's good. And you? Also good. A pause. Ruben, to his credit, understood the difference between Joel not having words and Joel not wanting to share them, and he waited the extra few seconds to determine which one this was. Good, Ruben said finally. Or Navy good, where good means functional and operational and secretly about to need a serious conversation. Joel thought about Victoria's hand. Good, he said. Ruben was quiet for a full 3 seconds. I RSVP'd for you to that mixer, he said. I wanted on the record that I did that. That was me. I did that. It's on the record. I just want credit. Ruben, I want actual verbal credit. Joel, I have been trying to get you out of that house for 14 months. You get the credit, Joel said. All of it. Full credit. Are we done? We are absolutely not done, but I can tell you want to get off the phone, so I'll accept partial payment now and collect the rest later. A pause. I'm really glad, man. I mean that. Joel looked out the kitchen window at the flat gray sky. Yeah, he said. Me too. He hung up and stood in the kitchen and let himself feel it without analyzing it, which was its own kind of discipline. The harder kind, the one the Navy hadn't taught him, and fatherhood was still teaching him. The capacity to be in a good thing without immediately preparing for it to end. He was working on it. Victoria called him Tuesday at noon, which was unusual. She rarely called during business hours, because business hours for her ran from approximately 6 a.m. to whenever London stopped having opinions, which was late. He picked up immediately. I did something, she said without preamble. He set down the wrench he'd been using on a cabinet hinge that had needed attention for 3 weeks. Tell me. I cleared my Friday. Full day. No calls, no meetings, no board prep. A pause. I haven't cleared a full Friday in 4 years. He was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do with it? I thought. She stopped. He could hear her choosing words the way she sometimes did when she was being careful not to perform and equally careful not to overstep. Lily has a half day on Friday. I looked at the school calendar. You looked at the school calendar. I have access to this district's public calendar. It's available online. I was not surveilling anyone. Victoria. What? I'm not questioning you. He stopped, found the right word. I'm glad. A pause. You're glad. That you looked, that you cleared the day, that you... He stopped again because the thing he wanted to say was larger than the space a Tuesday noon phone call had for it. Yeah, I'm glad. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I thought maybe we could take her somewhere, the 3 of us. If that's... Another careful pause. If that's not too much. Joel looked at the cabinet hinge. At the kitchen that was slowly becoming the kitchen, he'd meant it to be repaired functional, built by increments of Saturday mornings and late evenings and the steady accumulation of small decisions to stay. It's not too much, he said. Where do 7-year-olds want to go on a Friday afternoon in November? Lily, he said, will want to go to the Natural History Museum. She's been asking for 3 weeks. There's an exhibit on deep-sea navigation. A beat of silence. Then Victoria said with a quality in her voice He recognized as genuine delight, barely restrained by habit. Of course there is. She's made a list of questions for the exhibit guide. A written list. Color-coded by topic. Another beat. She is, Victoria said slowly, the most remarkable person I have ever met. And I have met senators. I'll tell her you said that. She'll file it appropriately. I have no doubt. A pause, softer now. Friday then. Friday, he said. He picked the wrench back up after she hung up and finished the cabinet hinge with the focused attention of a man doing a small thing well, because small things done well were how large things got built. And that was a truth that applied equally to cabinetry and to everything else that mattered. Friday arrived clear and cold. The gray finally broke in the sky, doing that particular November thing where it goes an impossible blue to compensate for weeks of flat. Victoria appeared at the door at 12:30 in a coat and scarf, and the specific expression of someone who is attempting to look relaxed and is approximately 70% of the way there, which was more than last month and less than she'd get to eventually, and exactly right for right now. Lily opened the door before Joel could get there. She'd been watching the window and looked Victoria up and down with her assessment face, and then said, "You look different without the baseball." "I imagine everyone does," Victoria said. "No, I mean you look..." Lily tilted her head. "More like a person." Victoria blinked. "I'm always a person. You know what I mean." Lily turned and walked back into the house, clearly considering the matter resolved. "Dad says we're going to the museum. I have questions prepared." "I heard about the questions. They're color-coded." "I heard about that too." Lily looked over her shoulder at Victoria with an expression that said she had just upgraded her opinion of this person by several significant points, turned back and called, "Dad, Victoria's here and she already knows about the color coding." Joel appeared from the hallway with his jacket, and the same expression he'd been wearing a version of since Saturday, the one that was not quite a smile, but lived next door to one and had taken up permanent residence. He looked at Victoria at the door, and at Lily already 3 steps ahead of both of them, and felt the specific uncategorizable weight of a moment that was exactly what it was supposed to be. "Ready," he said. "I have been ready," Lily said, already pulling on her coat. "I've been ready since Wednesday." The Natural History Museum on a clear Friday afternoon in November was sparsely populated in the way that made the exhibits feel like they belonged to whoever was in them. Lily moved through the Hall of Ocean Life with the focused intensity of a research scientist, cross-referencing field notes, her color-coded list in one hand, stopping at each display to ask questions of the information panels that the panels could not adequately answer, and that she then redirected to either Joel or Victoria, depending on which one she'd assessed as more likely to know. The deep-sea navigation exhibit was in a side gallery. Low-lighting large projected images of bioluminescent creatures recorded sounds of the deep ocean that were more felt than heard. Lily stood in the middle of it and turned slowly in a circle and said nothing for almost 30 seconds, which was the longest Joel had ever seen her go without speaking in a public space. "It's very quiet down there," she said finally. "Not exactly," Victoria said. "Sound travels differently in deep water. Things communicate in ways we're still learning to hear." Lily looked at her. "How do you know that?" "I read widely." Victoria said it with the particular neutral tone that meant I prepared for this outing the same way I prepare for board meetings, which is thoroughly. Lily looked at Joel, then back at Victoria. "Did you read about deep-sea navigation specifically?" "I read about several things. Before Friday." "Before Friday." Lily processed this. Then she said in the tone she used to confer her highest distinction, "That's what Dad does. He prepares." "Yes," Victoria said, and the look she gave Joel over Lily's head was the fully open version of that direct gaze, no boardroom, no armor, just real. "I know. They stayed 3 hours." Lily asked 17 questions, 14 of which were answered between Joel and Victoria, 2 of which stumped them both and were added to a list Lily titled Things to Research, and one of which, a very specific question about how deep-sea creatures navigated without light, led to a 20-minute conversation between Lily and a museum docent named Gerald, who was 71 years old and had clearly met very few 7-year-olds who asked questions, like Lily asked questions, and who sat down on a bench to answer her properly. Joel and Victoria stood slightly to the side and watched. "She's going to run something someday," Victoria said quietly. "I know. A company, a country, a space program." She paused. "Something large." "She'd prefer the space program," Joel said. "She has opinions about the organizational structure of NASA. Of course she does." Victoria watched Lily redirect the docent to a follow-up question with the efficient grace of someone who had been conducting interviews since before she could reach the table. "You know what she has that most people in my boardroom don't. Tell me." She's genuinely curious. Not performatively curious, not asking questions to seem intelligent or to establish dominance in the conversation. She actually wants to know. The answer matters to her. Victoria was quiet for a moment. "You don't find that often, in children or adults." Joel looked at his daughter. "She was born that way. I didn't teach her that." "You taught her that it was safe to be that way," Victoria said. "That's not a small thing, Joel. That's the whole thing." He looked at her. She was watching Lily and the docent, her expression doing the open thing again. The careful, deliberate, fully chosen openness that he understood now was not a vulnerability in her, but a decision. Victoria Ashford did not open accidentally. When she opened, it was because she'd decided to, which made it mean more, not less. "Victoria," he said. She looked at him. He had been thinking about how to say this since Saturday. He'd run versions of it in his head, the way he used to run mission scenarios, checking the approach, identifying the risks, adjusting for variables. And then, at some point, during the Tuesday phone call, when she'd said Friday, and he'd said Friday back, and meant it with everything he had, he'd stopped running scenarios, and just let it be the true thing that it was. "I need to tell you something," he said. She held his gaze. "All right. I came out of the Navy, and I had no idea how to live without a mission. Everything I did the first year was I was performing survival. I was doing all the right things for the right reasons, and none of it felt real, because I was running on the same mechanism that kept me operational under fire, which works until it doesn't, and then it breaks you." He paused. "Lily kept me honest. She needed real things. She needed a real father, not an operational one. And she has never once let me get away with the performance version of anything." Victoria was very still. "And then I walked into a room I had no business being in," he said. "And you noticed I parked on the street. And I—" He stopped. "The honest version. Always the honest version. I have spent my entire life being very good at knowing what a situation requires and delivering exactly that. I have never in my adult life walked into something and not known what I was doing. And from the first 5 minutes of knowing you, I have had absolutely no idea what I'm doing." The corner of her mouth moved. "Is that a compliment?" "It's the truest thing I know how to say right now." She looked at him for a long, quiet moment. The museum moved softly around them. Distant voices, the low, recorded sounds of deep water. Lily's voice asking a follow-up question with the precision of a closing argument. "I want to tell you something too," Victoria said. "All right. I have spent 15 years being the most prepared person in every room. I have never once allowed myself to need something I couldn't provide for myself, because needing things from other people is how you get leveraged, and leverage is how you get controlled. And I have never—" She stopped, breathed. "I have never let anyone close enough to matter enough to hurt me. Not really, not in the way that counts." She held his gaze. "I called Lily back in 40 minutes. I cleared a Friday. I read about deep-sea navigation because a 7-year-old was going to an exhibit, and I wanted to be useful to her." She paused. "I don't do those things for people who don't matter." "I know," he said. "I'm telling you because I need you to understand what it means. It's not casual for me. None of this is casual." "I know that too." "Joel." She said his name the way she said the things that cost something. "I'm afraid." "I know." You keep saying that. Because it's true. Because I can see it and I'm not going to pretend I can't, because you deserve better than that. He looked at her. I'm afraid too. I'm afraid every day. I'm afraid of getting it wrong with Lily, of making the mistake I can't walk back. I'm afraid of... He stopped. The truest thing. I'm afraid that I spent so long learning to be operational instead of alive that I don't know what alive is supposed to feel like. And then this. He gestured slightly. The same small, unpolished gesture she'd used in her living room. This feels like alive. And that's terrifying, because now there's something to lose. The silence between them was the Saturday silence. The mission complete silence. The one that meant we held. We're still here. Lily appeared at Joel's elbow. She looked at her list, looked at them, looked at her list again, and then looked up at both of them with the expression she used when she was making a decision about something she considered important. Are you having a serious conversation? She asked. Yes, Joel said. About the two of you. Yes. She considered this. Then she looked at Victoria. Is it going okay? Victoria looked at Joel. Something in her face, the last remaining locked thing, quietly, deliberately turned its key. Yes, Victoria said. It's going okay. Lily nodded, satisfied, and tucked her list under her arm. Good, because I told Gracie at school that you were both coming to the winter concert, and I need that to be true. She looked at Joel. It's December 14th. I'm playing recorder. I've been practicing. I know you've been practicing, Joel said. I live in the house. I need you both there, Lily said with the matter-of-fact certainty she brought to things that were already decided in her mind. She looked at Victoria. December 14th. Victoria held Lily's gaze. The 7-year-old and the billionaire looking at each other with the same directness, the same seriousness, the same refusal to soften what was real into something easier. December 14th, Victoria said. I'll be there. Lily nodded once. The commander's nod. The thing settled and then turned and walked toward the next exhibit with her list and her certainty and her absolute bone-deep confidence that the world would arrange itself according to what was right, which was either something she'd been born with or something she'd learned from a father who showed up every single day, and probably both. Joel watched her go. Then he looked at Victoria. She was already looking at him. December 14th was a Thursday. Victoria moved 2 calls and rescheduled a board prep session and did not explain to anyone why, because it was not their business. Why and when her assistant asked if there was a conflict, she said no. There was a concert, and her assistant, who had worked for her for 9 years and had never once heard her use the word concert as a reason for anything, said, of course, and updated the calendar, and then sat at her desk for a moment doing whatever people do when something shifts that they've been waiting to shift for a long time. The school auditorium was full in the way that elementary school auditoriums are full on concert nights. Parents, grandparents, younger siblings, with the stunned look of people who have been brought somewhere and not fully informed of why. Joel arrived at 6:40 and found seats in the 4th row center, which he'd identified as the optimal location for both sightline and acoustics, because some habits only needed to be redirected, not broken. Victoria arrived at 6:44. She came through the auditorium door in her coat and found him in the 4th row in approximately 5 seconds, which still only surprised him a little, and sat down beside him in the folding chair that he'd saved in the way that people save seats for people they're certain are coming. She was holding 2 coffees. He looked at her. I know, she said. But I didn't know if they'd have anything here, and I couldn't show up empty-handed to a concert where a 7-year-old has been practicing. He took the coffee. She's going to see you from the stage. I know. She's going to tell everyone around her. I'm prepared for that. He looked at her. How prepared? I read 3 articles about elementary school winter concerts. Typical duration, common performance errors, appropriate audience response. She paused. One article specifically addressed the recorder. What did it say? That it is a deeply challenging instrument and that enthusiasm in the audience matters more than technical perfection. She looked at him. I intend to be very enthusiastic. He looked at her, this woman who had built $4 billion from a failing firm, and slept on her office couch, and handled London calls, and 12-paragraph emails, and board members who said concerns when they meant control, sitting in a folding chair in an elementary school auditorium in December, with 2 coffees and 3 research articles about recorder concerts. "Victoria," he said. "Don't," she said. "Don't what?" "Whatever you're about to say that's going to make me cry in an elementary school auditorium." "I wasn't going to make you cry." "You were absolutely about to say something." "I was going to say thank you." She stopped. "For being here," he said. "For December 14th. For moving the calls. For the coffee and the research articles and the—" He stopped. "For showing up." She was quiet for a moment. "You show up for people," she said finally. "That's what you do. You showed me what that looked like, and it turns out I've wanted to do it my whole life." She looked at the stage where the school orchestra was beginning to arrange itself in the particular organized chaos of children who have rehearsed many times and are still individually surprised by the event. "I'm a little late to the practice," she said. "But I'm here now." "That's enough," he said. "That's everything." The lights went down. From the 3rd row of the 2nd tier of performers, Lily appeared. She was in the white shirt the school had sent home, a notice about her hair pulled back with the precision of someone who had managed her own appearance since approximately age 5. Her recorder held at the ready position she'd been practicing in the kitchen every evening for 6 weeks. She scanned the audience with the same efficiency she scanned every room, identifying position, confirming presence, establishing that the situation was as it should be. She found Joel. He raised 2 fingers, their signal, the one they'd developed without discussing it. The one that meant, "I'm here. I see you. You're good." Then she found Victoria. Victoria raised 2 fingers. Same signal. Same angle. Same register. Lily's serious face held. She gave the commander's nod, small, certain the thing settled. Then she looked forward at the conductor and stood at attention with the focused readiness of someone who had prepared and was not afraid. Joel looked at his fingers, at Victoria's hand beside his, at the stage. He thought about the resignation letter still warm from the printer, about standing in the Admiral's office and saying, "My daughter needs a father more than this Navy needs a ghost," about 14 months of figuring out how to be a person instead of an operator, about a mixer he hadn't wanted to attend, a woman who noticed he'd parked on the street, a text at 11:47 on a Saturday night. He thought about all the things that had to be exactly what they were for this specific moment to exist this Thursday evening in December, in a folding chair in a school auditorium, with coffee and 2 research articles and a 7-year-old on a stage who had color-coded her questions and named her Rabbit Captain, and told him once in the specific serious voice she used for true things that weird and broken were different, and he should know the difference. He did know the difference. He was learning every day to live on the right side of it. The conductor raised her baton. Lily raised her recorder. And then the music started, imperfect and earnest and completely exactly right, and Joel Hartley, former commander, United States Navy. Single father man who checked exits and parked on the street and made cereal in a specific order, and held his breath every time the thing he loved was in motion. Sat in the 4th row center of an elementary school auditorium, next to a woman who had built an empire and cleared a Friday, and read 3 articles about recorders because a 7-year-old had asked her to be there, and he did not hold his breath. He breathed. Fully, completely. The way you breathe when you are not surviving. The way you breathe when you are finally, unambiguously, irrevocably alive. Victoria's hand found his in the dark. No ceremony, no calculation. Just the simple, weight-bearing, deliberate act of reaching for something real and holding on. He held on back. On the stage, Lily played her recorder with everything she had, which was considerable, and the music was imperfect and earnest and completely exactly right. The same way everything worth having is not perfect, not managed, not 3 moves ahead, just real and present and here and enough. More than enough. The kind of enough that once you have it, you understand you were never surviving before. You were just waiting to begin.